Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another brand new video, and today we're going to be talking about Typhon and this card's absence into a lot of people's extra deck, and recently has been resurfaced with Pack actually playing this card and putting it back onto the map. And recently I've been looking at YCS Sydney's deck list between, all the top American players, and it seems like Typhon has been sneaking its way up into the extra deck back again. So let's go ahead and talk about Typhon and why it's coming back, and if you should be playing this in your deck, if even in your deck at all, right? So the number one reason why Typhon was originally cut in this particular format, because of a new card that we all know and love, and it is Promethean Princess, right? Promethean Princess is the biggest check to Typhon ever, because Typhon is not a quick effect, obviously, and anytime you summon this card, it's just going to lose to Promethean. And even if you somehow can stick this card, it means that your turn has officially ended, and you cannot do any further plays, right? And that kind of sucks, right, along with this card, especially like now that you have to really clean up boards and also stopping their follow-up. Pretty much boards are either being extremely broken to the point where you don't need Typhon, or they're being OTK'd by Zealantis. So this card never actually sees the light of day. But why has this card been resurfacing again, right? So originally when this card came out in Age of Overlords, this card was actually almost a staple, I would say, in every deck that was out at that time, right? Being very strong against Vanadium, being able to, bounce back Baron, and it can't even activate because monsters with over 2900 attack cannot activate against decks like Vanadium, and also decks like Rescue Ace could just easily make them and clean up boards. And also there wasn't Promethean Princess, so that just made it so much more easier, right? Now, the reason why it's actually coming back, I think, is because of this guy over here, SP Little Knight, a card that we all know and love as well, right? But what do you mean SP is the reason why Typhon is good? Now, we're in a format where hand traps are being thrown around left and right. Hand traps galore, right? Anytime we're hitting critical mass of hand traps, we're pretty much going to be playing against our opponent that's opening 3 hand traps, 4 hand traps, whatever, how many amount of hand traps that they could open. And also likewise, and our decks too, we're also playing a bunch of hand traps, 3 to 4 hand traps, in almost every hand, and we're almost always stopping our opponent. But what is our opponent doing when they get stopped? SP Little Knight, right? So let's give you some some generic examples. Let's say our opponent starts with, let's say, Summon Snake Eye Ash. You hit them with Effect Veiler, they follow it up with Diabell Star, the Black Witch. You hit them with Infinite Impermanence, right? Because you have a lot of hand traps. Then they use those 2 monsters because they pretty much can't do anything with it, and they make SP Little Knight. Now they're going to be playing the game where they start throwing hand traps back at you. Now when you summon your Snake Eye Ash, they're going to throw their Veilers, their Impermanences, their Ash Blossom, whatever they want to throw at you. And now that SP Little Knight is on the field, and guess what cleans that up pretty well? The Typhon, right? So the Typhon actually is making its way back into the extra deck because of the interactions where, we're being put into these grind game positions, not really due to your fault and not really due to, anything really, but we're always considering how the games are actually being played. Now, in theory, it's like, oh, we make, each other's, we always full combo each other and we try to break the board, and Typhon isn't really good at breaking boards. But when you actually start playing these games and not just theorying about them, we do realize that, we're being stopped all the time by a bunch of hand traps, and Typhon is a very strong cleanup to those type of hand traps. And even on the following turn, right, you can always use your Typhon backed up with hand traps, and this card puts a lot of pressure on your opponent, because in 2 turns, if they cannot out you, not just out this card, but play through your hand traps, they are essentially dead, right? Because the first turn you're attacking them over SP Little Knight, it puts them at like 6,000, and then they pretty much only have I think 6,000 and 6,000 something, and then they pretty much have that turn and then the next 2 or 3 more turns to draw yourself out of it. And then if you draw any monster beside this, it's essentially game, right? So I think that's why it's extremely powerful. Another thing that this card actually is rising up in popularity is its sneaky little effect that it can do with the Lullaby of Obedience. Now let's go ahead and talk about Lullaby and the interaction with this card, right? So Lullaby of Obedience states that you can either call a card, your opponent can either special it to your field or add it to your hand. Now with this interaction, this is pretty funny actually. If you ever want to search a card in your opponent's deck, all you have to do is make this card, activate Lullaby, and even though it can't, because when you summon this card, you can no longer special summon, it doesn't mean that you can't activate Lullaby. It's just when you activate Lullaby, any card you call will be added to your hand instead. So this card is very interesting in that aspect, because now what you can do is, even when you get to those complex game states, like I was saying before, and now that your opponent is being cut off of follow-up, right? you can pretty much summon this card, clear their board, and even though they have follow-up in hand, you can play that Lullaby and call something like Nibiru, Droll Lockbird, or Ash Blossom, and now you can use that hand trap that you search with Lullaby because of the restrictions of this card, and then stop their follow-up turn. So I found that pretty interesting in this aspect, right? And that kind of evolves with the meta, right? Like, you know, Lullaby wasn't played before, but now Lullaby is being played. We're adapting to this critical mass amount of hand traps, so now Typhon's being played, and I think those are basically the two main reasons why Typhon is making his way back into the extra deck. It's super good with brand new cards that are, you know, being into the meta, Lullaby, and since the meta is in this critical mass of hand traps, Typhon, you know, is pretty good. So I actually think Typhon is an amazing card right now, at least for this video and, you know, post YCS Sydney, and I think everyone should be playing this card. I think it makes so much sense and a lot of the dynamics of these fire decks and how they work, right? So even though, you know, the theory doesn't kind of make sense because it does lose to Princess, but just shaping by how the meta works, this card is pretty sick. So let me know what you guys think below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and sub, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.